It's strange how you can diagnose everyone's pain but never see mine. Her voice was quiet, not accusing, not loud, just the kind of calm that comes before something breaks. Jungkook didn't glance up from the laptop. The faint blue glow reflected in his glasses as he tapped, fingers moving with mechanical precision. He was still in his hospital uniform, sleeves rolled up, stethoscope tossed carelessly on the couch. The house smelled faintly of disinfectant, clean, cold, lifeless, just like him. Wine, don't start this again. You know, I had three emergency surgeries today. You also had a wife waiting for you at her father's recovery room, but you didn't show up. That made him stop. The silence that followed was deafening. He slowly leaned back, expression unreadable. I texted you. I told you I couldn't make it. You sent a single word, Jungkook, busy. Her laugh was bitter, trembling at the edges. You say it like it's a full explanation, like that one word can explain comfort or care or love. He sighed, pressing his fingers against his temple, the way he always did when she spoke from her heart. Wine, emotions don't solve anything. You know, I can divide myself into. No, she whispered, eyes glistening. You already did. Half of you belongs to the hospital. The other half is just what's left of a man I once loved. The words hung heavy between them. For the first time, he looked at her, really looked, and something flickered in his eyes, but it vanished just as quickly. He closed the laptop. You're exhausted. Rest fine. We will talk later. She shook her head, voice breaking into a soft, tired laugh. There is never a later with you, Jungkook. Only work and excuses and silence. When she turned away, the hem of her dress brushed against the floor, a whisper of movement in a house that had forgotten what warmth sounded like. Behind her, Jungkook sat motionless, his eyes lingered on her retreating figure, on the space she left behind, a space he had filled with everything but love. Then, like a reflex, he reached for his phone and checked his patient's schedule for tomorrow. Because for him, emotion was a complication he never learned to treat. The morning after the forgotten anniversary, the air felt colder not because of the weather, but because something invisible had shifted between them. Jungkook sat at the dining table reading patient reports while sipping black coffee. You placed a mug in front of him anyway, 2 spoons of sugar, just how he used to like it. He didn't even glance up. You forgot to sleep again. Sleep doesn't save lives, fine. She looked at him for a long moment. And what about leaving? What saves that? He didn't answer, just went back to his papers. You didn't push, not anymore. You had learned that every word you spoke was an inconvenience in his word of silence. That evening, you decided to visit the hospital, maybe see him in his own word, hoping that would help you understand him again. The corridors were bright, sterile, echoing with hurried footsteps and faint beeping machines. You found him near the surgical wing, surrounded by nurses and interns who hung onto every word he said. His voice there wasn't cold, it was confident, commanding, alive. He looked like a man who belonged everywhere but home. You stood quietly at a distance, watching him smile faintly at a colleague's joke, a smile you hadn't seen in months. When he noticed you, his expression hardened instantly. What are you doing here? You hesitated. I brought you lunch. You skipped breakfast. He glanced at the container in your hands, then at the nurse standing beside him. For a second, embarrassment flickered in his eyes as if your presence exposed something too human. Why? You shouldn't come here. You know how busy it gets. You swallowed hard, trying to hide the sting in your chest. Right, sorry for disturbing your perfect routine. You left the lunch on the counter and turned away. He didn't call after you that night you came down with a fever. Your vision blurred, your body weak, but you didn't bother calling him. You already knew what he would say. Still, when he came home past midnight and saw you half asleep on the couch, pale and trembling, he frowned. Why didn't you tell me you were unwell? Your voice was hoarse because you would just send a nurse, wouldn't you? He didn't reply. Instead, he quietly took your temperature, his hands cold against your burning skin. There was a flicker of concern, real, visible, and for a heartbeat, you wanted to believe that maybe this was him trying. But then his phone rang. He looked at the screen, the hospital. He hesitated just for a second, then stood. I have to go. It's an emergency. You laughed softly, your throat aching, or not they all. He opened his mouth to say something but stopped. He turned away. The door closed behind him, leaving the faint scent of antiseptic and absence in the air. Hours later, you woke up to a nurse checking your temperature. She said Dr. June called her to take care of you. The nurse said kindly. You nodded, smiling weakly, even though it hurt more than the fever itself, because even in sickness, his care came from a distance. Days passed, you started writing letters you had never sent, small fragments of everything you wanted to say to him but couldn't. Sometimes you would find yourself sitting on the bed beside his white coat, just staring at it, wondering if it ever felt the weight of your loneliness too. You were not ready to leave yet, but something in you had already begun to let go. The night was drenched in rain, the kind that muffled the city's noise but made every heartbeat sound louder. Wine moved through the house quietly as if afraid to wake the ghosts of everything they once were. The clock struck two, its ticking blending with the rhythmic drumming of rain against the windows. Her hands trembled as she folded her clothes, not from fear but from finality. Every fabric she packed held a memory, a scarf he once complimented, a sweater she wore waiting for him on endless nights. Now they were just pieces of a story that had already ended. Jungkook was still at the hospital, of course he was. But this time she didn't wait for the sound of his card. She placed the divorce papers neatly on his desk. Beside the pile of medical journals he always prioritized over her. A simple note lay on top, written in her delicate handwriting. I can keep loving someone who treats me like a shadow. Her wedding ring rested beside it, glinting faintly under the desk lamp. Before leaving, she walked through the rooms one last time. The scent of his cologne still lingered in the air, faint but haunting. She paused at the doorway, eyes tracing the life they had built, quiet dinners, shared silences, half-hearted smiles. Then she whispered into the emptiness, Goodbye, Jungkook. The rain soaked her as she stepped outside, suitcase in hand. The world around her blurred in silver streaks, the city lights melting into tears as she refused to shed. Meanwhile, Jungkook returned home hours later, exhausted, soaked, and numb. He hung his coat, loosened his tie, and noticed the unnatural quiet. No faint hum of her playlist, no warm light from their room, just emptiness. When he saw the papers on his desk, his breath caught. He read her note once, twice, the words cutting deeper each time. His hand instinctively reached for that ring, still warm from where she had left it. For a while, he stood there, drenched and motionless, staring at the single object that carried more weight than anything he had ever lost in an operating room. He could save hers for a living, but not the one that loved him most. Days turned into weeks. The house that once buzzed with quiet life was now painfully still. Her coffee cup sat untouched on the kitchen counter, collecting dust. The empty side of the bed stayed cold no matter how many nights passed. At first, Jungkook told himself he was fine, that he needed space, that she would come back once her emotions settled. But silence had a way of creeping in. Slowly, suffocatingly, he began noticing things he had never cared to see before. The faint scent of lavender still lingered on her pillow, her handwriting on a forgotten grocery list stuck to the fridge, a hairpin on the bathroom sink, and then one evening, while searching for a document, he found something, a small voice recording saved in her phone left behind accidentally. He pressed play. Sometimes I think he doesn't even notice when I'm in the same room. Her voice whispered through the speaker, fragile, breaking, but still, I keep loving him. Maybe love is just another kind of fever, one that never gets treated. The phone slipped from his hand. For the first time in years, Dr. Jun Chungkook, the man known for never trembling even in the face of death, felt his chest ache in ways no medicine could match. At the hospital, his work began to falter. He had forgot to eat, skipped briefings, lost focus mid-surgery. His colleagues whispered concern. He's not himself lately. And maybe they were right, because the version of himself he once was cold, detached, unreachable had walked out the door the same night she did. Now, the only thing left for her was the ghost of her laughter in the hallway and the warmth of a love he hadn't known how to keep. One night, he returned home, sat on the couch where she used to wait, and whispered into the silence, I see you now, Wine, but you are not here anymore. It had been 3 months since Wine left, 3 months of silence that echoed louder than any argument they had ever had. Jungkook had stopped checking the clock when he came home. There was no one waiting, no reason to hurry, but every time he walked through the front door, his eyes still, by habit, searching for her shoes near the mat. She wasn't there, yet somehow she was everywhere. One rainy evening, Jungkook received a letter from the hospital's administration. Inside was a familiar name, Wine Joan. It wasn't about him this time, it was her. She had applied for a medical researcher's position in another city. His pulse quickened. She hadn't moved on completely. She was still walking through the same world he lived in, just far enough to never cross paths. Attached to the letter was her research proposal, the emotional impact of neglecting long term relationships. He stared at her name, printed it bold, and for the first time, the title didn't feel like research. It felt like a wound she had written for him to read. Fate, cruel as it was, made their paths cross again 2 months. Later, at an international medical conference in Seoul, he spotted her across the crowded hall, confident, graceful, speaking passionately on stage about the emotional disconnect of caregivers. Her voice was steady, professional, but when she glanced his way for the briefest moment, her composure faltered. After her presentation, Jungkook approached her, heart hammering like it hadn't in years. Wine, Dr. Joan, two words so formal, so distant. He wanted to say, You look beautiful, but all that left his lips was, You have been doing well. Her lips curved in a faint, polite smile. I learned to. He swallowed hard, watching her walk away again, this time not out of pain but purpose. And maybe that hurt even more. A few weeks later, a late night call shook him out of his sleep. Dr. Joan, we need you at the hospital. It's an emergency. Dr. Wine June was admitted after a car accident. His blood ran cold when he reached the ICU. His words stopped. She was laying there, unconscious, hooked to machines, fragile, pale, with a bandage above her brow. He froze at the doorway, every regret he had buried clawing its way back. She is my wife, he whispered, though technically she wasn't anymore. For hours, he refused to leave her side. He monitored her pulse, adjusted the IV, whispered words he had never said when she could hear them. You wanted me to see you whine, and now I can't look away. When she finally stared, her voice was weak but clear. You shouldn't be here. I never should have let you go. Days later, as she recovered, he visited her room quietly. The divorce papers were long signed, but he carried a new document this time, a blank envelope. Inside it, a single note. Not for the hospital, not for duty, for you, if you will let me. He didn't wait for an answer. He simply placed it on her bedside table and walked out because love he had finally learned wasn't about saving someone, it was about showing up before they broke. The hospital corridors were quiet, too quiet for his heartbeat. Jungkook walked briskly, the faint scent of antiseptic filling the air. He had performed countless surgeries, stitched lives back together with precision, but there was one thing he still couldn't fix, the woman he let go. When he finally saw her standing by the reception desk, time still, one looked different, not fragile like before. Her aura was calm, collected with a strength that made his thought tyrant. She turned when she sensed his presence. Their eyes met for a moment. Neither spoke. Only silence hung between them, thick with everything they never said. You came. I had to. It's the hospital that helped me when I was sick. I wanted to thank the staff. Her tone was soft, polite, distant, like she was speaking to a stranger. He stepped closer, his voice low. You left without letting me explain. She smiled faintly. You had years to explain, Jungkook. You just never did. He swallowed hard. I was scared of losing me. She asked quietly. He shook his head of realizing I already had. There it was, the honesty she had begged for all those lonely nights, and now it came too late. She looked at him for a long moment, those familiar eyes she once adored, now filled with quiet peace. Instead of lunging, I don't hate you anymore. Her answer was final. Then, can't we start over? Her voice trembled just enough to betray the ache she still carried. Forgiving you doesn't mean I can go back to the version of me who waited every night. I forgot how to love myself. He took a step closer, desperate. I can change, please whine, but she shook her head, a single tear slipping down her cheek. He treated her like air only to suffocate when she was gone.